Okay, so again, thank you and welcome. Today's meeting will be recorded. The recording and meeting presentation will be posted to the Vision Zero website, along with all other Vision Zero related materials, including meeting minutes and upcoming meeting schedules. All panelists will be responsible to mute themselves until they speak. Due to FOIA and public access laws, please refrain from using the chat feature for anything other than our ability to coordinate and help speakers who need assistance using Zoom. The question and answer field at the bottom of the participant pane will be used for public comments. Please refrain from entering public comments into the Q&A field until the public comment portion of the meeting takes place. Public comment will take place at the end of the meeting, and participants can raise their virtual hand to signify a desire to speak and wait to be recognized. To do so, you can open the participant pane and click raise hand at the bottom of the panel. Participants may also utilize the question and answer field at the bottom of the participant pane. In-person comments will be prioritized ahead of those entered into the Q&A field, and we will get to those as they come in. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our council chair, Commissioner Garrett Ucalito.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So I don't think we need to go around and necessarily do introductions. We have a couple new people on the council today, so I want them to introduce themselves, representing two of our agencies. So first, we have Eileen, if you want to introduce yourself, who you're representing. And
yes. Good morning, everyone. I'm Eileen McMurray from the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood. Very glad to be here representing Commissioner Beth Bai.
Thank you. And Jim Polites, new member from, well, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Commissioner. Appreciate it. Jim Polites from DMV here on behalf of Commissioner Guerrera today. Nice to be with everyone.
Thank you. And I think everyone else is our old standbys who have been with us for a while now. So we don't necessarily need to go do introductions, but on the screen there are the agencies represented as part of the Vision Zero Council. So we'll go ahead and adopt meeting minutes. These are all sent out in advance to everyone to take a look at. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Okay. And a second. Okay, all those in favor of adopting the minutes from the December 13th meeting?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Okay, Eileen. Okay. Thank you. So got those formalities out of the way. We can get into the substance. So just a reminder as to why we're here today. I want to talk about the fatality and serious injury stats for where we are today. Aaron, if you have that slide deck or slide to bring up. Well, so what I want to talk about before we get into the 0.05 presentation. So last year, obviously we closed out the year. I think we're at 386 for 2022 fatalities, because the calendar year, we can have additional fatalities attributed for the calendar year after the year closes based on when the data is collected and received from our hospitals. So we saw an increase. We closed the year on 384, but now I think we're at 386. A stark reminder of why we are all here today to focus on those lives lost, as well as on the serious injuries and all the crashes that are occurring and leading to significant harm amongst the residents of Connecticut and anyone traveling through our state. So it's a stark reminder of what we need to focus on. And I think what we've done here in the Vision Zero Council and what all the subcommittees have done have helped heighten the attention on this topic. It is a lot of discussion occurring at the state capitol this year, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, we invited our first speaker to come talk to us today about something that I think is an important conversation to have, focusing on the drunk driving and impaired driving on our roadways. And we're lucky to have the co-founder of the .05 Save Lives Coalition, Tom Luizzo, hopefully I'm saying that right, to present to us today on .05 blood alcohol content, blood alcohol concentration. He has an extensive career and background in the highway safety space. For those of you who don't know, NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, is broken up into regions, and each region has an administrator. He served as one of those regional administrators, helping direct highway traffic safety initiatives for his region for many years. So we're lucky to have him here today to talk to us about the fight to lower BAC levels from .08, where they are today, to .05. So Tom, I'll let you introduce yourself and then bring us right into the presentation.
Thank you, Garrett, and thank you, Aaron, for the invitation to address the council today. The .05 Saves Lives Coalition, we're about 5 years old, co-founded it with a colleague from the NTSB, Bella Dinzar. She's now up in Ontario working for the Transportation Injury Research Foundation, along with some other colleagues from NHTSA and David Sleet from CDC. And so this issue, as you mentioned, is getting some attention now in the media, getting attention at state legislatures. Of course, Connecticut has a bill as well. And so we're really out there trying to educate people about the lower BAC limits. So next slide, little history first. And okay, thanks. I mean, as you can see, this is a long struggle. Almost 90 years ago, Norway passed the first .05 Scandinavian country to do so. In the next 50 years, what you saw is some countries in Europe, Australia, moved to .05 as well. But in the United States, we kind of hovered around .15, eventually went down to .10. And then really it wasn't until Utah, Oregon and Utah passed an .08 bill in '83. So we were right around .15 and .10 for the longest time, 50 years since Norway actually reduced the first time. Eventually AMA and in 2000, Congress adopted the .08 through a series of incentives. Not many states joined in until the sanctions were added later on. All states eventually went to .08 by 2005, and a series of evaluations took place. We had California, Illinois, and we saw 8% reductions going from 10 to .08, which was pretty dramatic. Now, a law itself isn't going to reduce alcohol-related fatals, and that was coupled with really vigorous ad campaigns, paid and earned media, and very visible enforcement. You saw a lot of checkpoints, a lot of roving patrols. We don't see much of that, nowadays anymore. And so another 20 years passed. Senator Lautenberg eventually put a clause in so all states come on board by 2005. Now, NTSB, the very prestigious National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, both came out with recommendations in about 5 to 10 years ago, recommending we go to .05. There's a whole body of research saying this is a good way to go. And of course, now we know Utah passed the first law. Interesting thing about Utah, they passed the law in 2017. It didn't take effect until the end of 2018. So you had almost 2 full years of publicity about a law. And there'll be more about that in one of the slides later about the effect of just passing a law and then implementing a law as well from the NHTSA evaluation. So this year now, 2023, we have really over 90 countries. Scandinavian countries actually lower. Norway, Sweden, Japan included are at 02, at 05. In the United States, we have 6 bills: Connecticut, Hawaii, North Carolina, New York, Oregon, and Washington. There were hearings yesterday in Washington. Hawaii also had hearings. The governor was favorably behind it. It hasn't come out of committee yet. And then, of course, Connecticut, I believe you guys had a hearing last week. I'm not sure, what the results of that were. But the important thing is, any evaluations done during this time, we saw 8% reductions in California and Illinois. We saw larger reductions in some of the countries that went to lower limits. In Sweden and Netherlands, for example, 19% of all their fatalities are alcohol related. Now, here in the United States, we're up around 30% for the nation. Connecticut's even higher than that. You guys are around 40%. And you mentioned earlier in your remarks about the trends and how that, is getting worse. And so we'll come back to that a little bit later. So why do this? Why does it matter? Next slide. Well, DWI is the largest single contributor to road fatalities. We all know that 30% of fatalities in the nation. And I guess the troubling thing is we saw great strides between 82 when states toughened DWI laws and the mid 90s. We saw like 40% reductions in alcohol-related fatalities. By 2011, the number from 1982, when we started this campaign, was reduced by 53%. But since 95, it's been flat. We've plateaued. There's been no progress. So in Connecticut, we mentioned 40%. You mentioned 386 fatals last year. That's up 100 fatals from 2 years ago in 2020. 46% of all Connecticut fatalities have a driver that has some positive BAC. So we're facing a public health crisis, not just in Connecticut, New York, or the other states with bills, but really across the nation. Because we have an attention to this whole thing has waned. We used to get a lot of media attention through the 80s and the 90s, big campaigns, and that's kind of gone away since then. Next slide, please. Well, it's risky. Your chances of being killed between 05 and 79 is 7 times greater than at no alcohol. And these are studies done by NIAAA and NIH, National Institute of Health, and it's costly. 69 billion in economic costs from alcohol-involved crashes. When you look at Connecticut's numbers, there's a $240 billion economic loss for all crashes. Connecticut comes in at around $6 billion on that. When you look at just alcohol-related fatals, another $1.2 billion. Those numbers really don't resonate with much. I mean, they're so big, it's hard to wrap your head around them. But the important concept here, rather than just the number, is that it's not just taking lives, it's also costing us a socioeconomic debt as well that the nation is seeing in every state. And of course, losing a life is just, there's nothing that can compare to that. Next slide, please. The important concept here is that it's a level at which critical driving, skills are impaired. We lose visual function at that level, coordination, divided attention, tasks, judgment is also impaired at that level. It's a level above which risk is increased significantly. Most industrial nations are at that level. We mentioned, many nations across the globe, and it's an effective measure. Next slide, please. They work. I mean, Utah passed a law to save lives, and it worked. And it worked in other countries that have done it. We have studies that show you can expect about a 10 to 11% reduction. Some states, Utah actually saw more. When we see Utah's data, they saw a greater decline than that. When you look at Australia, they saw a 13% decline when they lowered their BAC to 05. 11% in BAC crashes. And Japan saw a 38% decrease. Now, Japan went to 2% O2 alcohol related. When you look at Connecticut, and I put up here a very conservative number of 12 to 15 lives, but don't forget we saw greater decreases in other nations. We saw a greater decrease, as we'll see pretty soon in a slide on Utah. Next slide, please. So here we are with the evaluation from Utah, and this is what really a lot of states are looking at, what most legislators are looking at. We saw almost a 20% decline in the fatal crash rate the first year the law went into effect. And that outdistanced the United States reductions and the surrounding states around Utah, with no significant change in DWI arrests, because that's also something that'll be thrown at when legislative hearings come up, is that this will be a greater burden on the police. And we'll see a little bit more that it will not be. And just overall, it had a positive impact on highway safety in Utah. Next slide, please. So there was no crisis from enforcement or judicial crisis. Police already are arresting under 21-year-olds, commercial drivers at lower limits. They're simply going to continue to do what they've always done. No new training. You're going to look for the same cues. The horizontal gaze nystagmus and the standardized field sobriety tests, those 3 tests that police give at the roadside, they're valid at 05 as they are at 08 and 10. The probable cause for the stop is the same. You're still looking for the same cues. And now with cannabis laws and recreational, cannabis laws coming into effect, this will be, it can, in Canada, saw a little aid to the police in terms of probable cause being lowered for making a stop. So there could be some benefit there. We need more research around that. And so one of the other aspects that come up, the majority of arrests is still over 08. The average BAC of arrest is usually around 1.4 or 1.5. But you'll see a drop in those rates as well. And that's the big benefit of this deterrent effect of 05. Next slide, please. Big scare, average, alcohol beverage industry, basically would run ads, come to Utah on vacation, go home on probation. These were big red flags thrown up that never happened. Spending on alcohol and recreation went up 7%, according to the NHTSA study that was done. Visits to national parks increased. Social media posts were very positive. And the alcohol sales and tourism measures continued to increase. So all of these criticisms that had been received were really shown not to be true and never happened in Utah. Next slide. Public awareness is pretty high. AAA's done a study, and NHTSA has also done opinion surveys and studies, and people support lower limits. Most people won't drive after 2 or 3 drinks. They know already to limit themselves. And there are a lot of supporters for this. You got the National Safety Council. The NTSB issued a report 10 years ago. I don't know if you can see, Reaching Zero, that's available online. NTSB has it in one of their most wanted laws to lower BAC limits. And I mentioned the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine issued a report about 5 years ago, and that's available online as well. Very prestigious research done at the time, WHO, and it just on and on. Next slide, please. So the potential for 05 law, issues that come up is that it's going to cost a lot of money to implement. It won't. We saw that proven in Utah. They really didn't do anything different. They ran ad campaigns the way they always ran ad campaigns, and there were no additional costs to the police or the courts. You might expect a small increase in arrests, and I believe the arrests at 05, there's a slide that shows them going down, but they actually went up slightly in Utah in that under 08 range. But can it be enforced? As I mentioned earlier, same rules. We have, same cues are being looked for. Probable cause tests are the same for this as well. And it will deter high BAC drivers as well as low BAC. I have a slide later. Aaron it's hidden right now, but it'll show you that what happened in Utah is that the impact of the law suppressed BACs at all levels. And that's going to be one of the criticisms we'll hear, is that this 05 law is only going to have an impact on low BACs. That's not true. It changes behavior across the board. We saw that with 08 as well. So there's this really robust general deterrent effect of this kind of law. Next slide, please. So basically, this is my last summary. Basically, it's backed by good science. Majority of Americans support it. It's proven around the world to save lives. It's proven that in Utah with the most recent evaluation. By the way, with Utah, they stopped collecting data in 2019 because, of course, we all know the pandemic hit in 2020, and that just threw a monkey wrench in everything. There had been plans to continue the evaluation for another couple of years, but just as you know, in your own state, everything just got so skewed and just, you know, went off the charts. So hopefully we'll settle down and we can take another look there. But Utah remains still lower than their surrounding states. Doesn't increase arrests. It does deter impaired drivers before they get behind the wheel because it is deterrent impact of having this law. It's effective with high visibility enforcement. As I said, no law is going to do this, no one thing. But what we'll see is publication and publicity around the law. And then, of course, you have to back it up with some enforcement. We saw that in the 80s. And we'll, hope to see that again. And the idea that innocent social drinkers are going to be victimized and locked up at 05, and it'll discourage alcohol consumption, again, not the case. We did not see that. It's really a primary prevention law that can have a big impact. I don't know, Aaron, if there's time, it's up to you. There are a couple hidden slides that talk to some of the things like how many drinks, and maybe a little bit of, there's one slide in there from Utah about how it had an impact on high BACs. It's up to you.
Yeah, is this the one you're talking about here, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, this is from the Lifesavers presentation from Amy Burning from NHTSA, and it's so, I mean, don't worry about the important point here on all the rows. The first row being when the law was signed, and then the second row after it went into effect, a column, I mean, on the right. The important point is at the bottom, when you see drivers suspected at BACs at 05, 10, 08, and 15, we see minus signs across the board. So you had an impact, significant impact on all BAC levels. So this law didn't just have an impact at low BACs 05, and that's going to be a criticism we're going to hear. And that first column is when the law was, and there's a big benefit in publicizing when a law is passed, and you'll see a bump in your data, you'll see a decrease because the public then becomes aware of it, and they're not going to take that chance of driving and being caught. And so that's just the point I wanted to make about that, because that's one of the things you'll be hearing about why go to 05, and because you will have an impact on all BAC levels. I mean, that's it. If there's questions, there are a couple other slides about drinks, but it's not one drink and then a social drinkers are going to, it's going to vary on, food in your stomach, how tired you are, by your gender, your metabolism. I mean, so basically it's going to be 2 to 3 drinks for a male, maybe 1 to 2 for a female to get to 05. And more than that over, certainly over a 2-hour period. That's just, and you really, we try not to get into that, because what happened in Utah was after the law, when people made arrangements for alternative transportation, the NHTSA study looked at that, and people actually had other plans. They made plans. Up to 20% of people made different plans, and that's what goes on. This is an old slide from NHTSA from years ago, and you can see here, number of drinks to get to different levels, but it's going to vary. We don't use it anymore because we don't want people playing games with it, and basically make other arrangements. But it's not going to be 1 glass. That's the important point on that slide. And some of the critics are going to say that I can't have 1 drink. I think we went over that. Next slide. There's one more. This is just, we talked about, okay, this last one, this talks about how you're impaired from studies that NHTSA did at different levels. And you can see impairment starts at 02. People say, I'm not drunk at 05. Well, your coordination has changed. Eye movement or you can't track peripheral vision. And so there are things that change. And I think that last slide, Aaron, was just because of cannabis laws coming, we saw that, yeah, that one. The odds of being in a Christian, this was done, almost 10 years ago. So there's certainly more cannabis and drugs on the road. We saw that from a survey, but basically the risk is greater when you're at 05 than it would be with cannabis. And so there's so much publicity around cannabis. And what we're trying to do with a slide like this is show, but you still have this great risk at 05. And I'm sure that marijuana risk is going to go up now as more states pass laws. This is a long time ago, and now we're seeing more on the road. The IIHS has done some studies, and they've seen an increase in crash in all the states that have passed recreational cannabis laws. But we need a lot more evaluation on that. We don't have a quantitative test for impairment for drugs, and so there's a lot of work to be done in that area. I think that's it for me. If there's questions or
Yep. I think we definitely have questions for you, Tom. Thank you. I'm going to start with just a couple questions, and then council members, I think, probably have some questions as well. I appreciate you bringing up the fact you brought up earlier in the presentation about it's not just the fatalities, it's also the other impacts. You mentioned the economic impact. I think you mentioned $6 billion for Connecticut. I think that's something I try to remind people too, is the impact. A fatal crash is the worst possible outcome, but there's many other crashes that occur at no fault of the other driver who is impacted by a drunk driver, where even if there is no injury, their car may be totaled. That's an economic impact. They may have no other way of getting to and from work or to and from school. You're impacting that individual's life to get to where they need to go, especially if they live in a community where there is no public transportation or other method to get where they need to go or support their family. Or if the other driver is not insured. There's so many other factors that come into play that could have a negative economic impact on the individual, on their entire family. So I think that's important to remember. And then there's the injuries that may be with them the rest of their lives as a result of the crash. One question, sorry, Tom. Yeah.
You just said it's so important to be cognizant of that. Yep.
So we did have the public hearing on this proposal. One thing I have heard from some individuals since then is, do we need to do additional training for law enforcement? And my understanding, I'm not law enforcement, I'm not trained law enforcement. But I have been to some wet labs, so I've seen some of the training that occurs. My understanding is the standard field sobriety test, they're trained to be able to detect impairment. Can you talk a little bit about the training aspect that may, that law enforcement goes through and how they are able to detect impairment?
Right. Well, the superintendent from Utah, who's available, should there ever be hearings in any state, he's willing, and the legislators that sponsored the bill are willing to talk about that issue. Basically, it was the same training, as I mentioned, horizontal gaze nystagmus, the one leg stand, and the walk and turn, which are the standardized field sobriety. Those three tests basically apply at 05 as they would at 08, 10, and above. So any additional training would be obviously a bit around the law itself about the fact that the BAC limits are lower. But the cues about driving slow, windows open, the odor of alcohol, weaving, failure to keep your lane, those cues for police would be the same. And the superintendent keeps making a point whenever he goes to speak, is that the police just are doing what they've always done. They're not acting any differently out there on patrols. They're still looking for the same cues. So there was no additional burden, at least according to the superintendent from Utah, on the police in terms of training, other than this is a new law and it's in the books and this is where, you know, where impairment is. Now, some states are looking at the law to make it an administrative license revocation at 05 to 08, and then make it that criminal offense at 08. And that's up to each state. You know, administrative license revocation is proven to be very effective. It provides for a swift, sure punishment, which are those two pillars of general deterrence, is that you punish somebody quickly and for certain, and so you can achieve it through an administrative license revocation with that per se law. That the fact that you failed the test, you blew 06, you per se are guilty of that offense. That's the beauty of a quantitative test for alcohol. We don't have it for drugs. Beyond that, I guess, you know, I'd have to reach out to some law enforcement folks in Utah to find out if anything addition has gone into training in that aspect.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Council members, any of you, if you either want to just jump in or raise your hand, ask your questions.
If questions come up, Aaron can send them to me too by email. I'd be happy to, you know, supply additional information, and, you know, if they come up later on.
No, I see Jackie has her hand up, and then I see Susan unmuted herself too, so she probably has questions. So
I love
Jackie,
watching these studies. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I could talk all day about this, Susan. So I'll try to make this as brief as possible, but I suppose I'm a prosecutor in the state. And so my concern about the burden of proof that you were talking about, and that we would have that same probable cause determination made by the police at a 0.05 that we do currently have a 0.08. The assessment doesn't really stop there. So we would need to be able to follow up that arrest decision with a successful prosecution, which would require proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So my concern would be getting, and maybe this is more of a comment rather than a question, but maybe we need some supporting laws to ensure that we get those quantitative results. Because right now in Connecticut, individuals can refuse to provide a chemical test. And so if you're talking about utilizing the same law enforcement assessments roadside, at a 0.05, you are most likely going to see fewer indicators, fewer clues on those standardized tests. And so if you couple that with a refusal to provide a chemical sample, that's a challenging case to present for a prosecutor before a jury. So maybe if we could get somewhere with electronic warrants and police phlebotomy so that we're able to get blood draws, some type of supportive evidentiary
Right.
support.
Yes. I doubt you'd want to forcibly take blood, the bloodsucker law. Some states have them. If there's no fatality, no serious injury, if it's a property damage career. So there are some practical considerations in demanding a sample. But the big advantage of having an implied consent law, and I'm assuming Connecticut does have an implied consent law, that once you get your license in Connecticut, you have to give, and if you do refuse, the penalties usually in most states, and I suspect in Connecticut as well, I'm not familiar, are just as severe for refusal as they are for being convicted of DWI. And so, yeah, you don't have a conviction, you don't have a criminal offense on your record, but you do lose your license. And in most cases, you're subject to an assessment and treatment that may follow with that assessment, and you're off the road without a license, which is what we want to do. That's what administrative license revocation does. So my answer would be, as long as you have a strong implied consent law, if someone is killed in a crash, then you want to take that blood sample. to take that case further for manslaughter case or whatever you want to pursue. But I would rely on the implied consent. That's the whole purpose of it, and have the same penalty for refusal as you do for DWI conviction. And if you go to 05, it should be a per se law. So the idea that the police stop you with probable cause, he was weaving, he couldn't keep the lane, the windows were open, his lights weren't on, and it was at night. And so we stopped him. We smelled alcohol. We asked him for a test. We gave him we gave him the field sobriety test. He flunked, but he wouldn't give a sample. Well, now you still have him for the refusal, as long as there was no injury, and that's a judgment call on your part. And I'll speak from New York, for example. They have 05 to 08 now. They call it driving while ability impaired. And the courts are backlogged. If you look at any court system, they want to clear these cases. And by having an 05, and it's presumptive 05 to 08, it's not per se, they get him right away to plea to that, and it clears the docket. They get him into treatment. They assess. He cannot plea out of alcohol. He has to stay in the alcohol track. And ultimately, that's our goal, is to get him off the road. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's the way a lot of states deal with it. You do have implied consent, right? I mean, they're in Connecticut.
We do.
Yeah. All right. So that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. So I'll go Susan and then Mark.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation. I really thought it was very interesting and provocative, because I work for the Department of Public Health. I am in the Injury and Violence Surveillance Unit, so I look at a lot of this data as well. I've done a little bit of research on the 0.05% versus the 0.08%, and have seen, especially what some of the work you were describing out in Europe and Norway, that other European countries, I was thinking, as you were saying, the 0.05% have shown effectiveness in reducing accidents, reducing injuries and deaths. So I'm totally in support of going to 0.05% here in Connecticut. I think it would be a great way to prevent injuries and fatalities and disability. So I just want to say that out front. Another thing that I saw on your presentation was you were talking about marijuana and versus 0.05 of alcohol, and how I think it was 1.05 versus 2.07 if you have alcohol, blood alcohol content of 0.05, as far as your risk of getting into a crash. Did they do any studies on the combination of marijuana plus alcohol? Because I know that from a study I looked at several years ago, there was evidence that, marijuana alone or alcohol alone, they do have their increases, but having them both in your system at the same time is, increases it even more. So just wondering about that, especially since we have now, legalized cannabis consumption in our over 21-year-olds here in Connecticut.
Yeah. Yeah, they have. There is a study that NHTSA did on risk and drug use and poly use. The alcohol in combination with usually marijuana is the most common, has increased. I had it here. NHTSA did the first study years ago. It was about 16% of drivers that had poly use on the road. Now it's up to 25%, and a whopping 64% testing positive for at least one active drug. And these are on roadside testing that NHTSA conducts periodically, where they'll set up a checkpoint with a local police department, bring drivers in and ask for a sample. No arrest can be made, and no personal information is taken. It is voluntary, but you'd be surprised how many people are willing to participate. If they fail, they're given a ride home, and there's no record of driving while intoxicated or impaired. But in those studies, and they're difficult to do, but NHTSA does them periodically. Drug use is skyrocketing during the pandemic. First couple of years under COVID, there was more drug use on the road than there was alcohol on these surveys. I mean, it was just amazing. So you're right, it's increasing, and the relative same risk level that you point out at 1.05 with marijuana as being completely sober at 0. Don't forget, that's 10 years ago, where you're saying that basically you're at the same. I'm almost certain it's going to be different today.
Yeah, the potency is so much higher now, right, than 10 years ago of THC.
And exactly what the drugs on the road. So yeah, you take everything with a grain of salt. Look, obviously when you see research, but it's just such a mountain of research around this topic that it's kind of hard to ignore.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. The poly use is something I'm definitely concerned about, especially because we don't test everyone beyond alcohol, right? If there's no fatal crash involved, in many cases, the labs will stop at 0.08 and not know what else is in their system. So.
Yeah, we know that. I have a paper. I'll send this to Aaron and he can distribute it on the poly use, but there are drug recognition experts in police departments, not an awful lot of them. And it's a long procedure. You got to get somebody in a dark room, measure pupil size, blood pressure, and a bunch of other cues the trained police officer looks for. And can be very successful in predicting the class of drugs, of like half a dozen classes of drugs. He can pick out one. But it's a lengthy process. And as you just said, if you have somebody failing the breathalyzer, many police departments and some of the supervisors will say, hey, get back out on the road. We're not going to waste time doing this additional testing for drugs. And so that is a problem. There should be more drug recognition experts, but we really need a quantitative test, and we don't have that yet. We don't have a BAC, we don't have a breathalyzer for drugs. Somebody smokes marijuana, it could stay in their system for weeks. Now, how did it impair their driving? We don't know. We're starting to do research in that area. Just how impairing is it, and at what levels? There are some state laws that actually specify a level in the blood sample. But we're going to need to do more in that area.
Yep. Yeah, I'm glad we are, as part of our cannabis legalization, we are increasing the number of DREs in Connecticut and expanding A-RIDE training. Mark, I'll let you go next.
Thanks, Garrett. Thanks, Tom. Really just to really echo some of Jackie's comments before, that with the reduction of the per se BAC mark, it does beg the question of, is additional training needed for police officers? Because with a lower BAC, less clues would be present, arguably. So not only with psychophysical tests, but also the HDN test. For example, with a lower BAC, it could be argued that the onset of horizontal gaze nystagmus prior to 45 degrees may or may not be present. So with that being said, I think if this comes to fruition, additional training would be needed for law enforcement officers across Connecticut to recognize clues that may not be present, that would be present with someone with a 0.08 BAC or higher. So just wanted to echo those comments from Jack. Also, Tom, you raised a good point in terms of per se amounts. And Garrett, just to your point you mentioned earlier, moving towards in the future, is it something to look into in terms of a per se limit? For example, mirroring Colorado's per se limit of 5 nanograms per milliliter of delta-9 THC for cannabis use. So we may have that poly use going on for both drugs and alcohol. So thanks again, Tom.
Yeah, I'll reach out to Utah, and from what we have from the literature and the NHTSA study, there was no additional training. police continued to do what they always did and looked for the same cues. You know, it makes sense what you're saying, but the idea was that with the law was to basically, you know, have a general deterrent impact and to let the public know that if you drive at lower levels, you're going to be caught and you'll be in that same net. And but I'll see if, you know, if there's anything else I can find in that area. So far with the NHTSA study, there hasn't been, but I'll reach out to Utah.
Yeah, Tom, that's a great. So when I went out and met with Utah a few years ago, and you know, after the bill had passed, but before it took effect, and then met with them again after it had been in place for about a year. You know, they, and the NHTSA report shows this, right? They saw the improvements in the decline in crashes and fatals even before the law took effect, just because of the deterrent effect. Many people thought it was in place. And so they were making better choices about what to do after drinking, which is really what we're all asking for, is to make the right choice and not get behind the wheel. And this can help deter that, is what Utah has shown.
Tom, thank you for that too. And Garrett, I think if I can, what I'll do, Tom, those resources that you shared during the presentation, you can send those as well as any other studies, and we'll post those to the resources section of the Vision Zero site, so folks can check those out for themselves.
Great. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Eileen?
Yes, so I'm coming in as a little bit of an educator and a behaviorist. So I love seeing the data from Utah. But as you mentioned, this is a primary prevention activity, and we want to change behaviors. So looking at the baseline behaviors of alcohol consumption in Utah versus Connecticut, I would wager that you would find a significant difference. So I think when we look ahead, we'll need to think about that. And the marketing may need to be something other than what Utah employed.
Yeah, no, it's Utah is a unique state in that respect. You're absolutely correct. I will say this: alcohol consumption numbers that NHTSA collected were similar to what they were in other states. And it's interesting in the nations like Sweden, Norway, that consume the same amount of alcohol as Americans or more. There's one of the resources I'll send is from the NTSB that looked at consumption rates of alcohol, and so they're either at, and none of them are lower than the United States. They're either at or higher in these nations, yet their percent of alcohol-related fatals are 19%, 20%. I mean, that's like, we're at 30%. And so the law is working there in the sense that they're not driving, but alcohol consumption is just as high.
It's just a small follow-up. I'm wondering if Susan or DPH have any data on Connecticut prevalence for those behaviors, because that would be something to consider. And then there's a question of regionalism, right? We're bordered by 3 other states, so it would be interesting to see how we could align our efforts.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, when states, you know, increased the drinking age from 18 to 21, we had issues between states that stayed at 18, and kids would cross borders. And so that could be a case here as well. I think we saw that a little bit with recreational cannabis, where there's traffic, interstate traffic, you know, to go to a state that's more favorable, in quotes. But that is a concern. What we saw with the NHTSA study was that Utah, though, saw greater reductions than their surrounding states. NHTSA study looked at several states. I'll send a link to that study. Everybody can look at it. But they looked at the surrounding states as well as the United States, and Utah performed better, you know, than everybody. But Utah is a different state. You're right.
Tom?
And you mentioned DPH and epidemiologists. That's something we can look into. We're not tracking it now. Eileen, okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Susan. Okay, well, Tom, I appreciate you presenting to us today. We're going to take all the materials you have provided and the other materials you share with Aaron. I know we do have the NHTSA study that came out, but if you have other studies as well, we'll post all those under our resources section so the public can access them as well in one place. And we'll share them with the council members, obviously.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning.
Thank you. Okay. Muted there. Okay. Moving on to the next agenda item was legislative update. So I just wanted to, it's our first meeting of the 2023. The legislative session is currently underway. So I wanted to give an update on two bills that are of interest to the council as well as people tuning into the council today, and then see if any other council members have any updates on any legislation that may be of interest that you're either tracking or that your office or agency has introduced. 5917 is the General Assembly's Transportation Committee introduced this bill. It includes the recommendations that came from the various subcommittees up to the council, and then that the council recommended to transmit to the General Assembly. They took those recommendations, turned them into legislative language, and they did have a hearing on that bill. Significant support for a majority of portions of 5917. That includes provisions like open container, motorcycle helmets, automated traffic enforcement devices. It includes other recommendations about things like requiring a complete streets plan to be eligible for discretionary grants, intersection evaluations, and other pieces. It's a pretty significant piece of legislation. It has a safe routes to school education piece as well. So I know the Transportation Committee chairs are very eager to continue to move this bill along. For those who don't know the process in the legislature, what happens next is the committee will take the testimony that was received. They may make some changes to the bill, and then they will vote inside the committee to advance it or not. And then what's called a JF, or joint favorable report out of the committee to either another committee or to the floor of the House for action. So that's the next step in the process. There's a deadline. I think the end of this month is the deadline for them to take action on any of the bills in the Transportation Committee today. I will note one of the provisions that the Vision Zero Council committees recommended was that to be eligible for competitive discretionary grants inside CONDOT, that you had a community had to have a complete streets plan in place. So we have actually rolled out the most recent solicitation for community connectivity grants. And in that, we did give bonus points for any community that has a complete streets plan, but then also flagged that the next round we do will require one. So we're putting the communities on notice that in accordance with the recommendations of the Vision Zero Council, that change will be taking effect in the next round after this. We didn't want to do it immediately because we want to give the communities time this year to complete their complete streets plans so that they're ready for the next round. It's putting them on notice. And then the other piece I'll mention is 6746, which is wrong way driving detection and prevention. Everyone knows this is a very significant issue here in Connecticut. The number of wrong way crash fatalities went up 500% last year. So this bill would expand DOT's program to install wrong way driving detection and alert systems at ramps. It also would have us use technology to alert when the the detection systems on the ramps notice a driver going the wrong way, it will notify Connecticut DOT as well as the state police of that. There's also provisions that would require things like rumble strips and other countermeasures. So this is, I know this is going to be continue to be a hot topic throughout the legislative session. It's a priority of, I think, all the caucuses in the General Assembly, especially in the House side, after the loss of their colleague. So I would encourage everyone to pay attention to that. So those are the two I wanted to mention. I don't know if any other council members have any other legislation that you're following or that your agency or office has put forward that you want to flag for other council members. No one's jumping in, so it's all quiet on the on the rest of your fronts. Nothing, Jackie, on the Chief State's Attorney's watching? So.
There are no traffic related provisions that were put forth by the Division of Criminal Justice. I will say, just from a traffic safety perspective, there was a somewhat unrelated bill, and I cannot remember the number now, but it was to permit individuals to take the driving test in any language. And for me, that potentially implicated some DUI enforcement actions, because we do require individuals to be read an implied consent advisory, and whether those similar language adjustments would need to be made all the way through a DUI arrest process. But that's the only legislative piece I would add here.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I don't know. DMV, do you have anything on your side, Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. Jackie, I perked up when you said the languages. That's a that is one that's swirling around. I know a couple of Transportation Committee members were listening in today too. So I would certainly make sure your input is heard on that one. Commissioner, the only other one that I would just mention is there is a transportation bill on school buses and school bus drivers that comes into DMV space just for regulation wise. I think it does have a lot to do with shortages right now, but there are some safety provisions as well, and school buses do come into DMV space. So we are watching that one. It has had a public hearing. That number is 1081.
Thanks, Jim.
Sure.
Susan.
Hi, sorry. So we haven't proposed any transportation related bills. I'm looking at the ones that really kind of affected us that were I guess proposed by the Department of Transportation. But one of the things I was wondering about, there is a public health bill related to and it's HB 5934, and it's related to licensure and providing accommodations for people with learning disabilities when taking certain licensure exams. Now, I know the public health, we have a lot of licenses for providers and things like that, but I'm wondering, is this something that would impact the DMV, license test exams? And I'm wondering if they have tracked this bill and if they would be impacted or have provided accommodations already.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. We, if it's the bill I am thinking of, we did weigh in on it. It is something that we do think about and have a medical unit that does work with folks who are or may need accommodations. I'd want to take a little bit of a closer look. There are many other things that are going on right now, but I am familiar with that one. If it's the one I'm thinking of, it is one that we do a lot of work around making sure that folks have just as much access as possible. So I'm happy to go back and look a little closer, but I do think I know what you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, and then there's another one that came across my desk about, and I know that the bill died, but it had to do with people donating their organs, who had been people who died in a motorcycle accident who are not wearing a helmet. That one was a little strange, but that one died in the process. Then there was a couple that I was tracking around the pedestrian fatalities, as well as I think there was another one related to open alcoholic containers, beverages in motor vehicles, and all these seem to have died, especially as one with the helmets that we were tracking in motorcycle operators and passengers under 21. That seems to have died as well. That was SB 97. So one of the things that we're just looking at right now is, and we're supportive, and which is not really related to injuries, but it's around protecting children from secondhand smoke while riding in motor vehicles. And that would be something that we're in support of and is being tracked by our tobacco control program. There's several actually bills around secondhand smoke and vaping devices being exposed to those while they're in the car. So those are some that we're tracking right now as well. Again, not related to injury.
Thanks, Susan.
Mhm.
Don't see any other legislative items, so we'll move on to the next agenda item. I think this is the second to last agenda item, then we have public comment. So a lot of text on here, but this is to remind everyone, so or I guess Eileen, because you're new to the council, we have 4 subcommittees we created to allow advocates, members of the public, organizations interested in these topics to help us and advise us on our work. So we created these 4 different subcommittees: engineering, enforcement, education, and equity. Took a lot of their recommendations. We had very active committees, very active co-chairs, and their recommendations came forward, and us as the council looked at those recommendations and ultimately passed along recommendations to the legislature in our annual report we submitted. So one thing we want to do is encourage public participation in these subcommittees. There we go. Aaron is showing we have the membership rosters, we have the leadership roles. We also have ability for people who are interested in participating to go to our Vision Zero website and contact us to show that they're interested in serving one of the 4 different subcommittees, and to get involved. And generally what we did last year was the subcommittees were meeting when we were not, because we moved to quarterly meetings for the council. So the subcommittees would be meeting in between to help inform our discussions. I'm of the mindset that we should probably continue a similar approach where, allow the subcommittees to continue to meet throughout the course of this year, and ideally have each of the 4 meet at least once before our next meeting in June, so that they can begin to work on their activities. I think we may want each of the chairs to talk with their subcommittees about what activities they're going to work on, because next session is going to be, in the General Assembly, there's the long session and the short session. So next year would be a short session, so there may be less ability to take up large legislative packages. So I think each subcommittee should discuss what they want to cover through the course of this calendar year. I don't know if any of you council members have ideas or direction that you would like to give to the subcommittee chairs or recommendations, but I think it's an opportunity to re-examine the goals of each of the subcommittees, and reassess their ongoing safety work in this space. And it's an opportunity to look at, we'll know what happens this legislative session by June 7th or something is the sine die, last day of the session, right? So we'll know the outcome of the legislative session. That still leaves a half a year to reassess what made it across the floor, what did not, what was left on the cutting room floor, what we as the council and the subcommittees need to look at revisiting based on comments received from legislature and from other members of the public. So there's a lot of work to do left in this calendar year. But I don't want to stall out the subcommittees. I'd encourage them all to meet continuously like they did last year, because there's just, with 386 deaths last year, there's too much going on to ignore and not stop having involvement of the subcommittees. So that's my long-winded answer and thought process about where I think the subcommittee should be going. Wondering if any of you have other thoughts, that areas you'd like them to refocus for this calendar year, so we can relay that. Eileen?
Yeah, Garrett, thank you. I wholeheartedly agree. I had the pleasure and responsibility of being a member of the Education Committee, and to a lesser extent the Equity Committee. And we had such good conversations. Sean and Ernie did an amazing job of coordinating all of our schedules, and I would hate to lose that momentum and that dedication to this really important issue.
Great. Yeah, and I mean, I've purposely tried not to go to the various subcommittee meetings, I don't want to put like my thumb on what I want them to talk about. I really want it to be a natural bottom-up approach, have the subcommittees come up to us on what their thoughts are. So I'm glad to hear like that you felt it was worthwhile, given that you served and you attended those. So that's great to hear. I'm glad that it worked the way we hoped it would. Okay. Any other council members disagree, or I think all of us are have some of our agency colleagues involved in one of the various subcommittees. So I do know one thing we will need is the equity subcommittee. We will need a co-chair to serve on the equity subcommittee. So if you have any of your colleagues who you think might be a good fit, pass along their name to me, and we'll discuss that. I know we want, generally the construct is, it's a co-chair. One person represents a state agency or office, and the other is a member of the public to help lead each subcommittee. So on the equity side, we'll need someone representing a state agency or state office who can get involved and willing to serve as that co-chair. So keep that in mind over the next few weeks if you think of someone you might want to recommend for that role. Okay. Anything else on subcommittees that you want to mention, Aaron?
Just really
We'll go
quickly, I
on
want to
this-
go back to that poll. I think what we have here, like we said, this is our first meeting of 2023. The subcommittees, completed some of their work, but don't want to lose that momentum. There may be folks on those subcommittees who, no longer have the ability to participate. And there may be folks who want to get involved in that process. And the way to get involved in that process is to visit our website and go to the How to Contact Us page. And there is a live poll, it's live right now, that you can go and apply to participate into up to as many as 2 subcommittees. So if there's folks here attending today who are not currently part of that process and wish to be, or if you know folks who would, want to be part of the subcommittee process, you can direct them to that poll. What I'm going to do is leave that poll open for a couple of weeks. And as responses come in, I'll direct them to the various subcommittee co-chairs so that they can get in contact with them and be invited to meetings and be a part of that process. So just wanted to mention that. If you want to get involved, that's the way to do it.
Perfect. Thanks, Aaron. And yeah, and people might want to swap different subcommittees. If they served on one last year, they might want to move to another one. So appreciate all the work you do, Aaron, to keep all this moving. I know it's like you have all those spinning plates in the air at one time. So, okay. Last agenda item is some administrative pieces. So June 6th is our next meeting. And then we have also one scheduled for September 19th and December 5th. Those are the council meetings. We'll be sure to, as there's activity on some of these pieces of legislation, we will flag for the council members so you are aware. One thing that, if you have topics that you would like to have covered at one of the upcoming council meetings, reach out to Aaron, let him know. If you have a speaker you'd like to have come speak for part of the council meeting, let us know. For June, I was planning on inviting our new Safe Routes to School coordinator who we hired. I'll let her introduce herself in the meeting. But it's a new position at the agency. We haven't had this for a while. The federal government under the infrastructure law now is, revitalized the Safe Routes to School program under USDOT. We're excited to have it launched again here in Connecticut. A great engineer. Actually, she has an education background and an engineering background. So perfect combination for Safe Routes to School. And she'll come talk to us about what she's planning to do to grow the program to help protect children on their way to and from school every day in Connecticut. And she has a lot of great ideas in the works. And so we'll be able to share that at the next council meeting and share how all the various state agencies and members of the public can get involved. But I know we also have talked about inviting the Vision Zero Network, which is like an umbrella organization for all the municipalities that are a member of the Vision Zero Network, have them come present in an upcoming meeting. But if you have other ideas, feel free to reach out to Aaron and myself, and we'll get individuals or topics on the agenda. Okay. Aaron, I'll turn it over to you unless there's anything else you want to add, Aaron.
No, I think you covered it, Garrett. Thank you. Okay, we can go over to the public comment portion. Just a reminder for everybody, you can raise your virtual hand if you want to speak. We'll try to do those in the order they come in. And we're going to prioritize those who want to speak in person over the questions in the chat. And then I'll also take the questions, not in the chat, excuse me, in the Q&A field as they come in. So with that, let's see. Chuck Harlow, let's see, he has his hand up. Chuck, you should be able to go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Chuck Harlow. I work with Fuss O'Neill. I'm one of the co-chairs for the engineering subcommittee. I'm also on the education subcommittee. Pleasure to be on both. A lot of good stuff. One of my questions were, we talked about House Bill 5917. I'm on some other safety groups, the Bike Ped Advisory, Connecticut's Bike Ped Advisory Board, and there's some other things. We're also working with the department on safety upgrades through my firm. And just curious, what are you hearing after the public info meeting on House Bill 5917? Is it seem like it has a lot of legs? Is most of it seem like it's going to pass, or does it seem like some of it's going to drop off? And the sooner we know what drops off, the better, so that when we meet as a subcommittee, if there's things in the engineering, we can maybe concentrate on other ways to get those things done, either through different, state agencies or other organizations. And I'm just curious what the thoughts are from you. You all probably have a better, access to the legislators and what they're thinking, and are probably asking you all questions. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck, and thanks for all the work you do serving on the subcommittees. I can't speak for the legislators, but I will say I have heard that I went and testified there during the hearing on the bill, and there were a lot of really good questions, on a lot of the provisions. I think the legislators were really impressed with the number of public comments received on the bill. So kudos to the community of individuals who care about safety and really reducing injuries and fatalities on our roadways, because they all showed up, and which is great. So I think we'll know more in the next probably 3 weeks when they hit their JF deadline, because they will vote before then on what to advance out of the committee. So I won't know, no one will know until we see what what changes they make to the bill in the next 3 weeks or so. I think, generally probably the most contentious ones that, we heard a lot about were motorcycle helmets, open container, and so those received a lot of attention. Automated traffic enforcement devices received a lot of attention. I think I did my best, and I think a lot of the members of the public did as well, to stress the efficacy of automated traffic enforcement devices. And that the proven safety countermeasure that they are. But we'll have to see what ends up coming out of committee. The Transportation Committee is a very good, strong committee that works on consensus on most of the time. So it's very collaborative, and the chairs and ranking members work really well together. So I know our two great chairs there and the two ranking members are going to work hard to try and find common ground. So we're all going to be watching with bated breath, as will everyone else who served on the subcommittees, to see what makes it out.
Thanks for that. I see Terry Thompson has her hand up. Terry, you should be all set.
Good morning, everybody. I am also the co-chair of the Enforcement Subcommittee. I have a question for our presenter, Thomas, regarding open container laws in other states, especially in Utah, where they did go down to the 0.05. Do you see any relationship to the enforcement of the open container law on that? I don't know if he's still on.
Terry, it looks like Tom dropped off, but if you want, I will pass that question along to him. If you could just send me an email, please. I will make sure Tom gets that question and we'll get you an answer.
Okay. Also, I was just wondering, because we're looking for more participation in the subcommittees, is there any way that we can incorporate that onto the website, Aaron, so that they kind of get a read of what the subcommittees have been doing and who they are? Because they're not really represented on the website.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. Certainly the subcommittee, so far we've captured that in the presentations, the meeting presentations and the meeting minutes, and each individual subcommittee's proposal or set of policy recommendations that they passed on to the council are part of the meeting materials that are currently posted to the website. So those are there. And also you can see in the resources section, the final set of policy proposals that the council transmitted to the General Assembly. But yeah, your point's well taken. I think there is, we can definitely set up a section for each subcommittee, say who they are and what they're doing. And then I think what we'll do maybe then is ask subcommittee chairs, to provide content in terms of updates as to what they'd like to be represented in those sections. So that's something that I can work on between now and the next meeting. And that's a good point. I appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate it. And I just want to give you an FYI on that link for signing up. There's something regarding Microsoft Forms. I tried to just look at it. And
yeah, I just got a couple of messages saying the same thing. I'm working on it right now, actually.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Got it.
Thanks,
That's it.
Aaron, for doing both fixing the IT problems while you're manning the show today.
We're
That's
working
okay.
on all of it.
Former DOT. I'm fully supportive of everything you guys are doing. So thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. The link was live when we tested it, but we'll fix that as soon as we possibly can. I don't see any other hands raised. We did have one question come in the Q&A box from Adam Weber that states one of the first slides mentioned almost 50% of fatal crashes had a BAC above 0.01. What more can we do to encourage arranging a designated driver or using public transit when engaging in any alcohol usage? Have there been any efforts to reduce BAC to 0?
I'll start, and then I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in. Very good points. I know the education campaign, we've done a lot of public education campaigns around, designated drivers, using public transit to do the shift and make the right choice. But we can always do better. I think it's important to always relook at not just with the ad campaigns we are doing, but also NHTSA. We do have constant communication with NHTSA and stressing to them, maybe revitalizing some of the education campaigns that are being used nationally. Because what tends to happen is NHTSA will set an education campaign and ask the states to use that during certain high visibility enforcement periods. So we are increasing, the governor's budget is increasing funding and increasing bus service across the state in many of the transit service areas. So encouraging people to use public transit if it's in your community, or utilize the technology on your phone through a rideshare app or a taxi in many of our communities. That option is available today. So we need to get that message out better. I don't know about the moving to zero. That's we can do some research on that and get back to you, Adam. I'm not sure if any of the European communities have moved there. I know Utah did not consider that. I know for commercial driver's license, it's 0.04, and for teens, it's 0.02. But I haven't seen an effort to move to zero yet.
All right, as long as nobody else wants to weigh in on that. Next hand up is Aaron Good. You should be all set to go.
Hi, Aaron Good. Thank you all for everything you're doing. A lot of great work has come out of the council, so thank you. In addition to HB 5917, a high priority for the New Haven Safe Streets Coalition legislative priority this session is HB 5353, which would allow New Haven to create a local traffic authority separate from its police commission, and to appoint traffic authority commissioners with genuine subject matter expertise in transportation planning and traffic engineering, which we're currently not permitted to do under Chapter 249 of the general statute. So the bill is actually sponsored by the entire Hampden State delegation, because this is also a very high priority for them in terms of grappling with traffic violence in Hampden. It is in the P&D Committee, Planning and Development, so it may have escaped the attention of some folks because it's not in transportation, but it's very important. We'd very much appreciate the support of the Vision Zero Council and DOT in advancing that bill. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks for that. Next up, hand raised, we have Lori McElwee. Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing your name.
You do deserve an award, Aaron, because you're one of the few that got it right on the first time. I've
All right.
never I got the opportunity to meet you in person, but thank you. I'm Lori McElwee. I'm the South Central Regional Mobility Manager for the state of Connecticut. And my grant has been made possible through the Connecticut Department of Transportation, statewide and also federal grants, to work with people who have seniors, individuals with disabilities, and veterans who need information on what transportation exists so that we can keep them connected to their important appointments, whether it's medical or family or just staying involved in the community, such as going to vote. And so I go to important meetings like this. I learn from Council of Governments and Transits who went for my grant, and just learn from them every day. And I can't come to meetings like this and not try to find ways to change what I do to make people's transportation safer. So I get a small budget for swag, and I've started to use that for safety, whether it's a safety vest that I can get at Odd Job Lot for $2 a vest, or lights that you can clip onto your belt buckle or clip onto your purse. And so just little things that I can implement into my job, into transportation, and work as a partner and make a difference every day in who I teach, and keep them thinking when I come off the bus to be safe, don't go off the curb right out into the road. So I just want to thank you. I've learned a lot from you, and I still want to continue to learn. So I appreciate you being here today and letting me have a chance to introduce myself.
Thank you, Lori. And I know I've met some of your colleagues in other parts of the state who work on the mobility, acting as almost a mobility ombudsman, right? So
Yes.
thank you for all the work you do to help everyone in our state remain able to get to where they need to go safely.
And Garrett, I just want to say thank you. I am available to come and speak to your groups and just tell them what I do and who I can help and give contact information. I'm in the South Central area, so please contact me and I'd be glad to come and speak to your groups.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Next hand up, we have Jay Strange. Jay, you should be all set.
Yeah, hi, thank you, council members, for your service. I really appreciate having a chance to talk with you today. Commissioner Iccolito, hello. I wanted to, this is Jay Strange, by the way. It's just like Strange, except there's no R in my name. And I work for Transport Hartford Academy in Hartford at the Center for Latino Progress. And I'm also serving right now as a community member for the West Hartford Vision Zero Task Force. So I've been paying a lot of attention over the last year to the places where pedestrian fatalities occur. And one of the things I wanted to share with the council, and maybe I'm new to the process here, so maybe this is a more appropriate comment to address to the engineering subcommittee, but I wanted to just sort of highlight some testimony that I offered to the Capital Region Council of Governments in doing its latest analysis of trends and issues and planning for the next 20 years. Most of the fatalities that occur for pedestrians occur on non-freeway arterial roadways. So that's multi-lane, high-speed roadways, and it's about 60% of all pedestrian fatalities, according to the Governor Highway Association report from 2022, occur on these multi-lane high-speed arterials, which we have many of in Connecticut as well. And I don't have specific state information, but I wanted to just throw out a request to this council to consider in planning for upcoming conversations, looking at road classification and how it contributes to pedestrian deaths here in Connecticut. I think that it's clear that that multi-lane high-speed arterials are the most dangerous place for people walking in Connecticut. And I think that there could be more information provided about where those injuries occur and why. And I'd love to see the Vision Zero Council focus a study and focus a subcommittee project on looking at how we can reduce those pedestrian fatalities. In a place I used to work at, Strong Towns, we used to call these stroads. They're a combination of a street, which is supposed to be a local resource that's a walkable, slow area, and a road, which is supposed to get you between two places quickly. And unfortunately, we build stroads a lot in America, and they're very dangerous, and they don't work as streets or roads very well. So hoping that the council can continue its excellent work this year and consider that factor in planning and preparations for the coming year. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Yep. I know we have a lot of good thing about Connecticut is we have a lot of data available through the crash data repository that's housed at UConn, able to really drill down on each individual fatality and injury and see where it occurred, what the conditions were. So I think that's something we can ask the engineering subcommittee to take a further look at.
Yeah, we can pass that on to them. And Jay, my apologies for the mispronunciation. I'm 1 for 2 there. But also, Jay, if you want to reach out to me directly via email, I can try to put you in touch with the engineering subcommittee co-chairs. Maybe there is an opportunity for you to either participate or present with them. We have 2 questions in the Q&A box. Lindsay Kane states that they're with Fox News covering the meeting, and they'd like a quick comment as to the importance of the council for drivers and the public. What should people know about the work being done to make roads safer, and why is it a priority for our viewers that will watch this later?
Okay, who wants to take that one? Nobody? Okay, I guess I will. So really, this comes up, this is tied back to earlier when we were talking about the subcommittees. The work that the Vision Zero Council has done over the past couple of years has been instrumental in helping to raise awareness of the issues related to injuries and fatalities on our roadways and what we as a state need to do to help combat this real serious public health crisis that we're facing. We've seen increases in injuries and fatalities, a huge impact on our communities and loved ones and friends and family. So we need to work together. And I think we are the first state in the nation to have a cross-agency group like this made up of very diverse state agencies all working together to try and address this. So what's really important is for members of the public to go to the Vision Zero Council website, which can be found at ct.gov/DOT. There's a link right there, and get engaged with the subcommittees, which are really diverse. They're not all, safety professionals. They are people who care about this topic, people who've been impacted by it, and get engaged in the various subcommittees and help drive the conversation forward. So that's my pitch to get more people involved in the subcommittees.
Thanks
Any
for
others?
that.
Aaron?
We have one more really comment in the Q&A from Amy Watkins, who is a subcommittee co-chair of the Education Subcommittee. Amy wants to let people know that they're planning an event in Hartford in November for World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims. If anyone would like to join the planning committee, please email her at awatkins01@connecticutchildrens.org. And Amy, if you want to work with me on that, that's also something that we can put on the Vision Zero website as well. So reach out to me directly and we'll get that up for you.
Great effort. Thank you, Amy, for doing that. Okay.
I'm not seeing any more questions in the Q&A box or raised hands. I'll give people one last chance here. With that, I think all public comments are complete.
Eileen?
Sorry, just one thought. Thank you, Jay, for mentioning that you're part of the West Hartford Vision Zero Council. Do we have any idea how many municipal Vision Zero councils may exist and how that number may have changed over time?
So I know Stamford has launched just recently a Vision Zero effort. I know West Hartford just launched theirs recently. I'm not aware of others, but that's a good, we can do we can check with the various COGs. They may have an idea in Council of Governments and see if they're aware of which communities in their COG boundaries have that. That's a great idea, Eileen.
Because it's great to have, the state level and legislative level thoughts and policies, but the local level is where things can really happen as well. And I happen to live in West Hartford, so thank you, Jay, for all you're doing. And Amy, thank you for being co-chair of the Education Committee. You've done a stellar job, and I will talk with you about the November event.
Okay.
Not
Seeing no
seeing-
other hands or
Not seeing
comments?
Anything else? Nope.
Okay. So then I'm going to see if there's a motion to adjourn. Okay, do I have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye, okay.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for participating. Aaron will be in touch with all the various subcommittees, and we'll be in touch with the various council members, and we'll share information over the next month or two as the legislative session progresses. So thanks, and have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Be well, be safe, take care.